Please give a warm welcome to Enza Capital's Sir John Lazar and Tariq from Affinity Africa.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear us clearly. It's a pleasure to be here, and lovely to see familiar faces in the audience as well. So this is actually going to be a conversation more about Tariq, who, as many of you in the room know, is wonderful. Just to briefly introduce myself, the introducer mentioned me as Enza Capital. I co-founded Enza Capital 7 years ago, and full disclosure, we made an investment in Affinity, so we love the company. I also wear two other hats. I chair the Raspberry Pi Foundation, so that's the charity that owns the whole Raspberry Pi empire. We took our commercial company public on the London Stock Exchange 2 years ago, so we have a very nice endowment for the charity. And I'm also president at the Royal Academy of Engineering. So that's my background. This is about Tariq. So I wanted to start really sort of exploring your founder journey. You've got such an interesting background, which you can talk about. Many of you in the audience may not know that Tariq literally was a rocket scientist. So he's come from a very, very interesting background. Can you talk a bit about the journey and what ultimately led you to start Affinity Africa?
Absolutely, and also thank you all for being here. We have very stiff competition. Just down the road, Tim Berners-Lee is speaking, and I guess we all owe our careers to him. Do not leave. Now that, in case you didn't know that he was speaking, I will buy you all a round of drinks since we're in a bar at the end of the talk. Thank you, John, and thanks so much for making it and for being here. The story about Affinity is an interesting one because I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs in Ghana. I'm from a town called Kumasi, which is about 4 hours north of the capital. I think I grew up with that sort of idea that the right career was actually to be an entrepreneur, not to be an employee. So when I decided I did an engineering degree, a PhD in physics, taught for a bit, which was very foreign for my parents. When I decided to get a corporate job, it was something that was just so unusual to them. So there was always this encouragement of come back home, do something good, build a business, add value. Why are you an employee? I had a bit of a crisis about 10 years ago. My mom actually called me up. I was working for a hedge fund for about 10 years, and I always sort of thought, do you need to be an asshole to work for a hedge fund, or do you become an asshole working for a hedge fund? It was the latter, and I was becoming quite intolerable. My mom calls me up and tells me, I love you. I was visiting you for 2 weeks. It's been 3 days. I'm back at the airport. I'm leaving. She kind of threw something out there, and she told me, you can't choose who you fall in love with. You can't choose your family, but you can do something about your career. I hung up, went up to my boss, quit. It was so far away from what I wanted to do, and I just ended up, before the financial crisis, kind of getting trapped in this job. Went to Ghana and spent a couple of years exploring what I could do to add value, in particular around financial services. Yep. And after a couple of years of meeting entrepreneurs, realizing that access to capital was such a big issue, decided to build a bank. Yeah. That's how it started.
Amazing story. We're going to get into the business, but I think what would be really helpful for people in the audience is if, like, in literally 1 minute, you can actually describe the business for people who don't necessarily understand Africa.
Absolutely. So we're a digital bank. We're the only bank in Ghana where you can download an app and open an account in 30 seconds. This may not seem like a big deal, but 78% of Africans are informally employed. So it's a woman who's in a shipping container with no ID, no provable address, and as a result of that demographic in our part of the world, over 60% of individuals have been excluded from financial services. So we actually built the first bank that focuses on the majority of Africans, and we use technology as a way for solving it.
Yeah, and what's the core problem you felt that those existing financial systems were just simply not addressing? They were failing. So is it they were not banking those people, or what?
I think it's a couple of things. So they weren't banking them as the first issue, and those that were being banked, everything was so expensive and so unaffordable, it just wasn't right. Like, banks charge transfer fees. There's even something in Ghana called turnover. So they literally charge a percentage of deposits that you have as a fee to just keep the money in those accounts. So in most cases, because inflation's so high in our part of the world and interest rates are so low, it's actually better to keep cash underneath the mattress than actually go to a bank, which is ridiculous, right? So the first problem we wanted to solve for is how do we fix banking from a structural point of view? And I spoke earlier this morning, so apologies if anyone was at that panel. And the point I keep trying to make is that, well, and there's a friend in the audience who used this, I'm just stealing your words, Will, I hope you don't mind. Like, banking hasn't failed Africa because banking was not developed for Africa. That's the big issue. So most of our customers, as I mentioned, they don't have the required documents to bank with financial services. It's not because they're not bankable, but because banking was not designed for them. And that's what we're trying to solve for, and adding that layer of affordability on top.
Yeah, that leads nicely on to my next question, actually, because there is this sort of common narrative from many people who don't know Africa, who will talk of kind of leapfrog opportunities. And I get quite frustrated and upset by the sort of leapfrog discussion. And I know you've actually said at points, I've heard you say, well, you can't leapfrog banking, and there's lots of other things we can't leapfrog. What do you mean?
So, I mean, it's great. We're in a tech conference, met so many incredible entrepreneurs here as well, too. When you're in a country like the United Kingdom and you're building something that's tech-enabled, you're building something on top of an infrastructure layer. In our part of the world, as a founder, you're solving for everything. Someone once told me that as a founder in Africa, not only you're building a product, you're also building the roads to go to work as well, too. Yeah. And I made this point once, like a lot of startups have been very well funded by non-African founders. A lot of money is piled into a part of the world over the last 20 years. And most of them who don't understand the local nuances of operating in a part of the world fail. A very simple example, you know, whenever you're pitching to VC, they always say, oh, so you're like the Monzo of Africa. Monzo will fail in Africa. You know, we had the Amazon of Africa. I won't name any names here. But what they struggled with was that the supply chain didn't exist for them. It wasn't just an app, right? You know, warehouses have to be built, and there's an energy opportunity that needs to be solved for as well, too. That same thing is applied to banking as well. You know, credit scoring we had to build ourselves. ID verification we had to build ourselves. We had to lobby government to change policy because the policies that they knew were developed in Switzerland. And that's why you just can't leapfrog. It's not this sort of instant automatic thing that happens in 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've obviously also seen like this enormous amount of money that's been pumped into African fintech. And I think people from the outside in tend to focus on mobile money or wallets. And obviously, that's been really important.
Absolutely.
Right? But it's different from building a bank. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
It is. I often say that mobile money is sort of the equivalent, our equivalent of Visa or MasterCard, right? It's sort of like having a prepaid card where you pay for a product, and the product and the platform is monetized through fees, right? A payment fee. In our part of the world, if you're buying a drink at this bar, the merchant's being charged, not the consumer. But for mobile money, it's actually the consumer that's being charged as well, too. So it's something that was created by the telcos 20 years ago. It's very prevalent in our part of the world. It's like over a trillion of transactions, and I can't remember how many people. It's like over 1 billion of actually mobile money accounts are on our continent as well, too. However, it hasn't solved for full banking because there are so many restrictions with mobile money. The telcos took the charge. You know, I mean, mobile money doesn't exist in the UK because banking works. Yeah. You know, and so what we wanted to solve for was trying to understand how we take it a step further. So we work with mobile money providers, which is very important. We use them as ATM, kind of cash in, cash out. They make their money that way as well too. But what we've done with our product is that there's no limits on account. The products are free. We provide interest across all our accounts, and then on top of that as well too, we give access to loans as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's worth saying to the audience, one of the reasons we invested in Affinity, Enza did, is because we obviously see lots of fintechs and then some fantastic companies, but many of them were on this path where we are going to move from being a fintech to being a bank, and they're actually very, very different skills. And one of the things we loved about what Tariq was doing was that he actually could run a bank balance sheet. He knew how to do that, and he thought about it. So that was very, very important. If we come down to sort of Affinity on the ground, particularly recently, it's scaled really, really quickly. And I know some of that's been word of mouth. It's like if you go into the big markets in Accra, you know, the word is spread. What do you think those customers are responding to? Like, what's the thing that gets them and keeps them?
I have to tell a story, by the way. One of your colleagues, Abdurrahman, was visiting us in Ghana. I don't know if he told you the story. He got out of the airport, and this was not staged. He got into an Uber, and he'd never been to Ghana before. You know the story? Okay. Yeah. And anyway, he asked the Uber driver, do you use Affinity? He goes, yes, they're the best thing in the world ever, and it was not staged. But he was then asking him and probing in terms of why he used Affinity, and I think it's a couple of things. We're all busy. You know, people don't want to, no one here wants to go to Lloyd's and queue, right? Maybe my grandmother did, but I certainly don't. It's like the most depressing experience. Everyone's very busy. In our part of the world, because everyone's a sole proprietor, an entrepreneur, it's an opportunity cost. The minute you're dealing with something that's not digital, you lose revenue. You're not running your business. So I think that's the first thing. That convenience element is something that we solve for. The second part of it as well too is affordability. So banks are super expensive. The charges are through the roof. The monthly fees are up to $50 a month, basically, to have an account, no interest, tons of deductions. We got rid of that as well. So we replicated what banking fees are like in this country as well. The difficult thing was actually not that. For a very long time, as I'm sure you know and you know very well, we spent a couple of years where numbers didn't pick up.
Yeah.
Because we're a new financial institution.
Yeah.
We got the first banking license in Ghana in 15 years. And no one knew who we were, and no one believed that we existed. They thought we were a scam. So they were like, what do you mean you can open an account in 30 seconds? What do you mean the accounts are free? How do you make money? What's the catch? Is this a scam? Is this fraud? And it wasn't until like certain pockets within communities started using us, driving past our office, even though we only have one HQ, that it just became viral. So we went from 20,000 customers about 18 months ago, we just crossed 150,000. With marketing spend close to nothing, entirely through word of mouth. Because people were using it, they were trusting it, they were going up to your friends and saying, oh wow, you use Affinity, what's it like? They were like, oh God, it's great. You can make a transfer, you can withdraw money, there are no charges on there. They've got these high interest rate accounts as well, but you're not trapped, you can move your money out whenever you want to. And I guess the product itself is what ended up becoming kind of the viral
And now
effect.
you're beginning to lend to them as well, right?
Exactly. So that's obviously the last step or the next step. We're introducing cards, we're going to do cross-border payments, and we just launch remittances as well too. So if anyone has any family members in Ghana, encourage them to open an account out there and you can send money to them. I don't make any money off of that, by the way, so that wasn't a plug for that. But lending was also a very important factor. And so there are two parts of the financial inclusion equation, right? It's being able to make sure that people can afford banking and an account, and that you make your money work for you and you earn interest. The second part is access to credit.
Yeah.
So whereas over 60% of adults in sub-Saharan Africa don't have bank accounts, less than 10% of businesses have access to credit.
Yeah.
And you need access to credit to grow. You need access to credit to employ people. If we're not all financially healthy and included, we don't have access to healthcare, education, clean energy. None of it kind of makes sense. So what we wanted to actually do as an overlay is we use data from the transactions of our customers. We know how much they earn, how much they save. So it's sort of very traditional in that sense, even though we use AI. And we credit score our customers. So within 30 to 90 days, a credit score pops up on your account. We provide you a line of credit, you borrow. We provide some of the cheapest interest rates in Ghana, certainly for our customer demographic, some of the cheapest, and even actually in some cases cheaper than banks. And we do loans of up to $50,000 for 2 years. And what we're realizing is customers who get to the stage where they can afford those long-term financing solutions, they're investing in their business, they're increasing the revenue by up to 5x, and they're increasing their employment base by up to 3.5x as well. And that's very important.
And very quickly summarize how you're making money out of that.
Loans. That's how we make our money.
It's as simple as
Yeah. I mean, it's very simple. The way a bank works is if you deposit with me and William borrows from me, if you give me £100 and William's borrowing £100, if I pay you 5% interest and William's paying me 20% interest, I make 15. That's basically it.
Yeah. And you've got to manage the balance sheet.
That too.
Yeah.
That too.
You were talking about all the challenges a few minutes ago, but what would you say is the hardest operational regulatory challenge that's got Affinity to where it is now? What's the thing that was toughest?
I'm going to use one word that kind of covers all the challenges, and it's probably perception. We're lucky that we have investors like yourself. There are tons of investors in this room that I know who have stuck for years, I can see you smiling, for years doing something that's very, very difficult. VC funding has dried up in our part of the world. It's all going to AI or to defense. Thankfully, ENZA has been by our side, obviously Elithea as well too, and a few other investors who've been incredible. So the first thing is the perception of investing in Africa and the risk, because access to capital is important for startups and innovators like us, because we only exist because we had visionaries that invested in us and supported us. The second is the perception around risk, and this is both with regard to the regulator. Yeah. When we explained to them that we were going to do electronic verification, they were like, what do you mean that's crazy? I was like, no, it's not. I mean, my colleague AJ is in the audience. He spent a year and a half trying to negotiate with the regulators to actually get them to approve our product. At one point, there was a physical meeting with 40 people and I think another 60 on Zoom from the regulator, just trying to understand what on earth we were doing, and that's kind of crazy. And then the third thing is the risk perception around lending in particular. We've given out about $15 million worth of loans. Our default rate's less than 2%. As long as you have the right data, you'll be able to lend. And that's a perception we'd like to break as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say to the audience, if any of you get Tarek with a glass of wine late at night, get him to tell you some of the stories about dealing with the regulator. I've enjoyed those over the years.
Late at night, lunchtime, afternoon, anytime.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more generally about Africa and how we're thinking about it. So one of the reasons we founded Enza was just trying to counteract the trope that comes from the global north. It's like we need to take the best of technology and apply it to African problems. So this sort of notion that Africans always just takers. And I think you and I have had this conversation before, and I know we've had it with people in the audience as well. It's like our contention is that there's amazing innovation on the continent, astoundingly resilient entrepreneurs, but also more generally that constraints actually drive innovation, like in a really, really profound way. How do you think about that? And in particular, how you think about it from an AI point of view?
And I should ask you that question. So I don't know if you guys know, but Enza are very, very active within the AI space. And it's an area that we use as a tool, in particular for us, to try and alleviate a lot of operational issues because you can automate a lot of things with AI. We have a lot of machine learning models. There's a huge issue with ID verification in our part of the world because the ID cards that customers have aren't really very good quality. So we use AI as a way of doing improved matching. And we went for about 44% to 98% auto approvals just using AI. The biggest sort of constraint and fear that I have when it comes to AI is eventually policies are going to be formed, right, around them. And it's the same thing that we found was a trap for us from a regulatory perspective. We didn't have a seat at the table as an African continent to actually drive what regulation looks like. How does that look like in the context of Africa when all the funding is going basically to a handful of companies in the US? I mean, what did Anthropic just raise? I think Mike did a post on it on LinkedIn. It was like 65 billion. Yeah. I mean, that's VC financing.
$1 trillion valuation, yeah.
VC financing in Africa has never passed including debt, has never passed $5.5 billion a year. It's sort of plateaued now at $2 billion a year. One company has raised 65 billion. How do we stand a chance against that? Well, that's my question to you. What should we be doing from an AI perspective? What should we be doing from an AI perspective so we have a seat at the table and we can form and be informed?
No, it's a fair question. And we were talking on a panel about this as well at Africa Tech Summit just on Friday, right? You could get me on my soapbox on this. So there's no question that Silicon Valley is enormously powerful. And obviously we also have the Chinese on the other side doing amazing innovation. I think I spent my career in Silicon Valley, and I love Silicon Valley. But Silicon Valley does have a way of presenting the world where there's just a single point in the future that seems to be fixed. There's only one way to go. It's like what we've decided is the way. It's very teleological. And everything is towards that point. And the trains left the station, get on board, that's the only thing. So that's one thing. The other thing is that they just assume abundance. They assume abundance of compute, energy, capital, whatever. That's all true. I would say two things. One is, on the first point, I think the thing about AI at the moment is it is actually, we're still at an early stage. It's a much more diffuse, heterogeneous, fragmented view of how innovation is going to work. It's not just going to be large models. There will be smaller models, and we're seeing that in Africa as well. So that's the first point. And also, a lot of these models are actually running on, they don't have to run on the most expensive NVIDIA GPUs. I know people who are running small models on a Raspberry Pi 5 doing inference in Africa very, very successfully.
Great plug.
Yeah, it's true. I've seen it lots of times. And then on the point about abundance, it's been really interesting the last couple of weeks because we're suddenly seeing this big thing where we're going, well, we can't just have token maxing. We can't just assume we're going to have tokens forever. So I think that constraint really does drive real innovation. And I think Africans can drive the kind of innovation that can go to the world.
Absolutely.
And of course, it's all true that we don't have a lot of capital. We have a fragmented system. All of that is true. But that's what we're all battling about.
Is there a way in which we can create a sense of agency on our end and urgency on the Silicon Valley kind of folks to include us in those conversations? And I give a couple of examples here. I don't know if you guys remember when the iPhone with the unlock function happened with the face. Does everyone remember that? and I don't know if you remember this as well too, but all my black friends could just unlock any of their black friends' phones.
Yeah.
Because they just did not have enough data to understand basically how to do facial recognition. And it was a huge fiasco for Apple. So collecting that data and that information is also important for the models that these companies are building. I know a great company in Ghana called Yimachi. They have been collecting data, in particular amongst black communities who have cancer, because cancer diagnostic tools and methodologies, even in the best of hospitals across the West Coast and East Coast of the US, don't have that information to improve their models as well too. So it is important development for everyone.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, there's actually a treasure trove of data across Africa, languaged in language is a really good example. It's not even written down in many cases. Government regulation, large enterprises, where it's not in the current models because they couldn't scrape it.
Absolutely.
And if we do that, we use that data with agency. I want to come back to you, talk about you. So, I know from conversations with you over the years, the sheer resilience and grit it's taken for you to come through all of the issues, infrastructure gaps, regulatory complexity, all the tough things that you've hit as a company. What have you learned about that personally as a leader, a founder?
I think if you've, I love my stories. I'm going to tell you a story of when I was at university leaving, and I was starting to do marathon running before I got into triathlon. And my college was very famous for rowing, and there was like this Harvard student that was visiting, coming here to do, he was like, I don't know what he was in the Cox, he was one of the rowers. And he eventually went to the Olympics for the US and won a gold medal. And as soon as he crossed the line, we were all watching on TV, and someone just put a mic at his face and said to him, you know, how did you get here? You won, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing he told the audience was, you gotta want it. And I rolled my eyes. I was like, what an arrogant man. You know, what a thing to say. But I think like kind of 20 years later, since that's happened, having started this journey in 2013, failed to get a license in 2015, failed to get the license in 2016, almost lost the business in 2018, sold my house to acquire a company in 2020, almost lost the business in 2020 because of COVID, got our license upgrade in 2022, almost lost the business in 2024. I thought to myself, why am I still here? And it was two things. Number one, no one ever sat me down and told me what you're doing is not going to work. You know, it's hard, yes, you know, do the hard things. But no one ever told me it's not going to work, right? And I had a good support network around me. The second thing is I wanted to do it. I cared about it. You know, I'm Ghanaian. I come from a Ghanaian family. I'm not African presenting. You know, I'm Middle Eastern by heritage. I come from a family that gave me the opportunities and the options to get to where I am. Because they were entrepreneurs, they made money, they were the first to go to university in their families, they wanted us to go to better universities as well too. And I was so deeply kind of rooted in this purpose of wanting to give people the opportunity if they so chose to be financially healthy, financially capable of doing whatever they wanted to. That at the end was what turned into my purpose after a decade of trying to do that. And it just...
And what keeps you optimistic about the next 10 years?
You can't not be optimistic. It's futile otherwise. Like, why on earth would you bother doing anything if you're not optimistic, you know? I know that the world's falling apart, in particular in Europe and the US, as I'm sure everyone knows, with everything that's happening here with those terrible marches. But the great thing about Africa is that we're actually uniting, you know? I mean, Ghana just got rid of visas for the entire continent. We have our free trade deals that are happening. You know, the EU's falling apart. We obviously left here in the UK with Brexit, but Africa is actually uniting. And that's actually giving me optimism because multilateralism still works in our part of the world. And I'm optimistic about the future of the continent.
And I agree with your point about Africa. I think people are coming together around AI as well. In a way which is very encouraging. So we've got a few minutes left. I wonder whether we should go to the audience for some questions.
If there are questions, absolutely.
If anybody wants to ask anything of Tarek, I think that'd be great. Why don't you introduce yourself very quickly and then ask the question?
Hello, my name is Stephen, and I'm a friend of Tarek's.
Everyone's here a friend, I think. You're great. The bribery worked.
Out of your journey over the last 10 years with Affinity, what's one thing you would change in terms of different decisions in terms of
Nothing,
work?
absolutely nothing. I can't change it. I don't even think about that.
No?
I can't. You know, I mean, yeah. If I start thinking like that, I'll give up.
Okay.
Sorry to cop out with that answer, but I don't think I'll take anything back. Thank you.
Anybody else? There's another question.
Hey, someone I don't know.
Hi, my name is Shadi from South Africa. Thank you so much for such an inspirational story. Big question. You are solving the problem for Ghana, right? But these are the problems that are ultimately all over the continent.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any plans to, to go beyond just the Ghana market and extend to other countries as well?
Thank you, absolutely.
As it happens,
Yeah. So you know what was remarkable? I'm from Ghana, so I thought it's an easy country to go to. I'll always have a home since my parents live there, and it's not a good look when you're 40, still living with your parents, by the way, but it worked for me at the time. We lobbied very hard to get our license from the regulator. Thanks to an incredible team of whom I think 3 people are in the audience here who we work together. We won a number of awards. The most important one for us in particular was for the first prize for the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. And that's a big conference that happens every year where all the regulators get together. What we noticed because of that, because of CB Insights 100, Fast Company, as well too, most innovative company in 2026, I think we're only 2 African companies on that list. What we realized is actually now regulators are approaching us and saying, what you do is so important. We understand that financial health and financial inclusion is important to us because we want to support small businesses. They're the drivers of socioeconomic growth. Would you be interested in applying for a license? And once you get an invitation like that, you get the way basically to do that. And South Africa is not one of those countries, unfortunately, but about 7 have approached us, and we're in the process of looking at about 2 of those to start applying into them.
Tansania being one, right?
Tanzania is one of them as well too. Kenya, Benin, quite a few. Yeah, so I've been very lucky there.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Damali. I'm a PhD researcher, currently studying AI and digital media at Surrey University. And I came to the panel this morning with you guys.
Oh, great.
So it's nice to come to this one. So my background is like TV. I work in TV. So I'm sort of big on like stories and storytelling. And I was just interested in knowing sort of what was your ethos or your core values in regards to building your company and sort of the story in which you told yourself that then relayed onto the customers, which has sort of allowed the success to build.
Thank you. And if you want any sort of answers around storytelling, you've got Bibi here, who's incredible, and you should chat to her afterwards. So I think the first thing is that it wasn't my company, it was our company. This isn't about me as a founder, it's about a mission and a purpose that I wanted to solve for. And I think there are kind of 3 parts to this from a leadership perspective and the narrative that went through my head over and over again. And there's some people here who've taken me through some very, very dark moments, and they still happen, probably once every 100 days as opposed to every day now. But I think the first part was like, who am I and what do I want to do in my life, right? I was an academic. I left the 2nd largest hedge fund in the world. I moved back home to live with my family. What do I want to do in my life? What's my purpose? So the first was about that sort of self. The second was then, okay, how do I convince other people to join me on this journey, right? Then it's no longer about me. It becomes about a purpose, about a joint purpose as well too, whether it's team members, whether it's investors, whether it's the regulator as well. Now we have a very kind of open relationship with them. It's still not great because they're regulators, but it's open. I think the third part, which is sort of the area that we're kind of trying to move into, which is very, very important, and trying to kind of form the narrative around it. And we've got an event in a couple weeks' time here, and it'll be published. It's on the 17th of June. A big report's going to be published. And it's looking beyond basically me as an individual or us as a company, as innovators, and more of us within systems, within trying to understand how regulators can work with us, how donors can support us as well too, because there's a lot of donor funding that goes into financial inclusion, how investors can mobilize capital basically for these purposes as well too, think tanks in particular around research. So it's moving kind of into the systems era. So I think kind of the story was always about a bigger purpose and looking at it in stages, and then the rest of it was kind of people around you and I guess sheer luck as well too.
I think that's a very good place. I think we're almost at the end, so it's a great place to end. Tariq, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for inviting me to share this with you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for making it. Thanks, everyone.